Hey everybody, this is Anne from Reaper Miniatures live this morning, and kind of sleepy, but we're here. Hi, and this is Reaper Miniatures Toolbox Pro Tips, where we actually concentrate on specific things instead of Anne just rambling on and painting a dragon for 2 years, you know, although that has its merits also. But hi everybody, hello. Nomad Zeke, I am lolling at your bone and chitin and your schedule being boned. But yes, good evening from Greece. Well, nice to meet you, Dimitris. I don't know that I've seen you on before.
Hello, everyone.
I have not been to Greece yet. It's on my definitely wanted to-do list, though, because it looks like a beautiful country. They value their money, they just don't care about your time. Yes, a cyclone. That is so true for so many things. Hi, me. It's Anne. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Jacob.
Hey, Jacob.
Everyone's flooding in now. I was afraid.
And painting has value no matter how rambly it is. It's, what is it? I forget what they call it. Like, it might be Anne Ramble, but I think it's something else. But essentially, it's when Anne Ramble's on, it actually does have value. That has been told to me before at my stuff. Hey, it's Rhonda. Hi, Rhonda. Yeah.
I was a little afraid because with like 10 seconds to go, we only had like 9 people in here.
Yeah.
But I think Twitch was not catching up.
Twitch was just trolling you.
Right, because we have like 50 something now. So.
Yeah, exactly. You come for the painting and stay for the rambling. Yes, the random rambling. Well, this is going to be kind of rambly today because although we are going to talk about bone and chitin, and we're using awesome Mr. Teak's Champion, who actually is one of my favorite models. I like our underwater stuff because it's pretty unique, and I really like this guy a lot. I like the texture. I think he's a Julie. Yeah, he's a Julie Guthrie. So I'm going to keep his little flag right down here on the bottom so you guys can constantly reference it. Isn't that handy? So I really like these fish guys. They're nasty and neat. I kind of think that I would use them as Sahagin instead of actual Sahagin because I think I like these guys better. Might even use them for troglodytes because they'd be great. But anyway, so this is our guy. So we are working on bone today. Oh, you're painting him right now, Grand No Cookies? Awesome. Fantastic. So as you can see, I've done him in 2 different colors, one on either side. And essentially we've got over here, we've got aged bone. I'm going to put my bone colors down here. We'll be talking about bone colors because bone colors often work for chitin, assuming you're working, kind of pale and crumbly chitin. We also have a color called Bethalian chitin, which is later in the line. And that's more of a biscotti. It's less golden than our stained ivory and creamy ivories. But all this stuff can be used. This paint tray, Kristen Dom's, it actually is porcelain. You can order them on Cheap Joe's Art Supplies online. If you are in the US, and I'm not sure Canada, but in the USA, they're only like $7 a piece, like $7 or $8 a piece. It's a 28 well palette, so it actually is more wells than this, but they also sell smaller ones. I love it because it's not as huge. The wells are much smaller than a typical flower well palette in porcelain, and that means that my paint stays wet longer. I can actually answer that question, Vimanakwa. We're off topic, but I can do it real quick. So a sand table is essentially a quick way of doing terrain. Its downside is that, well, it's full of sand, and so breaking it down is a pain. But what you do is you make a sandbox, a really shallow one. So you build a frame that's kind of like really, really shallow, say maybe 6 to 8 inches deep, a wooden frame, and you put it on plywood, and then you throw a bunch of sand in it. And what you can do then is you shape the sand into the hills and rivers and canyons you want, just like if you were playing at the beach, and then you spray it down with a mixture of paint and glue, with maybe a little bit of water in there to make it flow better out of the spray bottle, and you soak it. And because you're putting paint in it, you can color it as you spray the glue and sand mixture down. You want to saturate it pretty well, and what it gives you is a very hard crust. If you use a really fine sand, then you can totally, like make some pretty subtle detailing. And while it's wet, you can also stick stuff in it, like bark or, stones or other things if you want them in there, right? Like tree limbs, whatever to make it a cool sand table. And you can level off areas so that you can put terrain pieces on it in addition. But the mixture of glue and paint and water essentially lets you do some really subtle color gradations. It ends up being very pretty. Its biggest problem is you can't move it. So you're going to break it down for real after you use it. But you can still reuse a lot of the sand, and of course sand is not very expensive. So it is a cheap way to do a terrain table if you're willing to put it together like on place. Like we did it for the first ReaperCon because we could put it in the art room and we could work on it for 3 days. And then you can also paint over it. If your sand glue mixture on the top is too subtle for you, you can also add flock and all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah, well, it's that historical mini war game because that's what Ed grew up doing, right? Ed is from that world of historical mini war games, and so that he knew how to do it. So yeah. Yeah, this palette, actually, the porcelain makes it super easy to clean, Everlina. That's why I love it, is I just throw it in the sink with some 409er simple green on it, let it soak for, 15, 20 minutes, and then just hit it with a green scrubby. You can get it perfect. But yes, yeah, don't go there, Vigos, don't go there. So I discovered something last night, because I was actually looking at using bone colors. I'm working on a demon from Creature Caster, which you guys may have, if you've seen them at Adepticon, or they do big greater demons and tree people and a lot of really large resin monsters, and their sculpts are fantastic.
They also stream on Twitch.
Oh, do they?
We have rated them a couple of times.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, actually, I suggested to Ron that he invite them to ReaperCon because I think their models are fantastic. Even if you don't play GW, I've got one of their greater demons that's a female one that's probably based on, I don't know, who knows, but it's a really cool piece. But what I ran into is that for my primary colors for her, I'm using, well, you remember Orchid Purple, the new color that's going to come out in the Bones 5 Kickstarter. It's a really brilliant color, right? It's really, it doesn't have, I have a SKU for it somewhere, but it's essentially the next Kickstarter line range. So it's a beautiful raspberry color, right? Yeah, Viman Aqua, not really, because they're fragile, right? If you try to move them, you're just not, you'd have to build it so that you could put it in a flat truck or something. Even then, if it bounced at all, it probably would break. Yeah, and the sand table is also really heavy. Exactly. But so I ran into a problem because I was thinking about using bone. She's got a bunch of spikes, cool, kind of like, they look like spines almost coming off of her shoulders. And I was originally going to use my Bone Shadow and Aged Bone and Polished Bone triad, but then I realized, okay, so the problem is, and I talked, yeah, this is the Teak Champion. You can see his little flag down here on the bottom. There you go. I love this model. But so the problem you run into is that when you've got a very muted color that's very gray looking, like this Aged Bone is, and you try to put a vibrant color like this Orchid Purple next to it, it doesn't look good. You can even see that right here. So I thought about it and I realized that was just going to get me into trouble because I'm just, I want to use a super saturated color, and trying to work this off of that is going to be hard. Like, I could do it. I could put I could start the roots really dark maybe and work up. But when it comes down to it, these two colors just don't go together. So we're going to talk a little bit about, color theory right now. Really, the rule is that if you're doing more of a muted color, like if I was doing more like this, but mixed with some gray. Here, let me show you. Let's do that. I have gray in my hand. I will mix it with the orchid and show you how it changes. And then we can do a little color theory chapter this morning. Because why not? Because it's Anne, right? The Anne Babel does tend to go in that direction. So I'm going to take about a drop of that and a drop of my gray. I'm going to mix these together and get a much more muted color. It's pretty, though. It's a little more gray than you can see. It looks a little bluish, but that's just the muting. So let's try that. Okay, so now this, do you see? Looks much better. Like, if we cover that up, that goes with the bone, just peachy. And all I did was add gray. And this is really the key point, is if you are working with muted colors, you can get away with more muted neutrals, more grayish neutrals. But if you're trying to work with a vibrant palette that's pretty saturated, trying to toss in a grayish color like this is not going to work. There are tricks for dealing with it. I could shade really dark, so I put kind of a barrier between this bright tone and this grayed tone. And I could also take it up to white and kind of knock out some of this grayness by going up toward white. But in general, this gray mix is going to look so much nicer with that. So essentially keep that in mind when you're choosing colors. If you choose a color that's gray or that has a little bit of a grayish tone, it may not work well if you're also looking at bright colors. You need to kind of look at other colors that are a little gray. And if you have a color that you like the Orchid Purple, and you do want to use something like it, then just try adding a drop of gray to it like I just did. I added 90, 89 cloudy gray. Here's the Orchid. It doesn't have a label because it's one of my one of my first poured colors when I was making the samples for the Kickstarter.
Thank you for the Twitch Prime, Blueberry, and thank you for the raid, Taryn.
Oh, yay.
I appreciate that. And thank you for the host, Mike. How you doing this morning?
All sorts of love coming in. Fantastic. So yeah, so even if you don't have a grayish purple and you really like this raspberry color, just drop a little bit of gray in it. You're going to keep most of the character of the color, and you can work that way. At least you'll still have a similar purple to work. So there you go. A little bit color theory. Always use muted colors with muted colors. Hey everybody. How do I know if a color is muted or not? If you look at it, Forsaken Crow, and you think, oh, that's pretty bright. Or you look at it and you're like, well, that's not totally bright. If you look at it and it doesn't look like a really bright color, chances are it's muted a little. And there is a scale of muted. I mean, obviously, stuff like the Dark Elf Skin Triad has only a touch of purple in it. It's mostly gray. It's going to be extremely muted colors. Whereas this is still, you know, has a bit of color punch to it, but you can see that it's not as bright as this. So sometimes you have to look comparatively. The clear brights are, of course, the brightest of the brights. And so... yes, if this color needs sunglasses, then it's not muted. Correct. Yeah, but I mean, there is some mutedness going on in here. Essentially, whenever this color is built, kind of weirdly, because I was trying to match a glass color from an exhibition of Chihuly art that I went to. I love his stuff, and I loved that raspberry glass color, and so I saved a picture of it, and then I tried to mix it. It's possibly the fiddliest color I have ever tried to mix. But it does have a couple of what I'll call warring pigments in it, because it's got a lot of magenta in it, you can tell that. But then to warm it up a little bit, I added a little bit of a yellow, of an orangey yellow, kind of like Lantern. And so that has knocked it down. So it's not as bright as clear magenta, right? But it's still fairly bright. When you put it up here, you can really see it's got some nice vibrant color to it. So there are steps along. Yeah, so there are steps along the muted train, essentially. But what we're coming down to, so let's flip. So then I decided, okay, so on my demon, I think I want to maybe go with something more saturated. If you're looking for a more saturated, less muted, neutral, creamy bone color, you want the Stained Ivory and Creamy Ivory and Yellowed Bone Triad. I usually just use these guys and I make a 50-50 mix between them because Yellowed Bone was made to match an old Games Workshop color. And it's a little bit more muted. It still works as a triad, but I actually like it a little better just making a 50-50 mix of these guys. So this is Stained Ivory, and right away you can see how not gray it is, you know, comparatively speaking. See that? It's the same shade, meaning it's the same level of light versus dark, so like that, but you can clearly see that one side is much more gray and one side is much more yellow. Saturated is bright, Jason. When you hear artists say saturated palette, they mean bright colors. And what they're kind of talking about is saturated with pigment, right? Although you can also saturate something with black pigment, so that's not really, you know, appropriate, but that's where the term kind of comes from. So a saturated color is one that is more vibrant, brighter. Although you can also have a saturated purple, which is pretty dark, but still really, really vibrant, really eye-screaming, you know, purple. So that's kind of what, saturated is a weird thing, but that's kind of what it means. In art speak, art BS, as I used to call it in art school. But yeah, so you've got your muted neutral. We call these both neutrals because they're not really colors on a color wheel color. This one is very yellow-y, but it's still pretty neutral. Neutrals are something that aren't a part of the color wheel, and you can have a neutral that's a little toward orange. You can have a neutral that's a little toward yellow, like this Creamy Ivory. But they still play well. The nice thing about neutrals is most of them play well with a lot of other colors. So since I needed a good color for bone that was going to play well with my purple, I decided to try to reach for my more saturated color, and this works a lot better. I'm probably still going to need to like color a little bit, because you can see even this, like it works better, but it's still, this is very bright. Now, the thing is though, I'm going to highlight this color, and here's where we talk about how colors change when you start taking up area with highlights, because right now this is really bright, but if I'm going to mix it with white to do a highlight, that's going to change a lot of the color, and it's going to change an amount of the color depending on how much area I take up with the highlight. So if I highlight, say, 50% of this surface with a paler mixture, it's going to look pink. It's not going to look that bright purple anymore. Whereas if I leave most of the surface, the orchid purple, then it will still look like that. But if I want to, if I experiment, I can just blob in a couple of highlights here. But what's going to happen is it's going to work a little bit better because now by adding white to this purple, I have muted it. I have made it less, it's lighter, but it's not brighter. The pink that I make when I do that, let me mix it up here. It's actually a really pretty pale raspberry pink. I love it. I need it in a bottle, probably. So there's that pale. You can see how that is. So when you do that, and you can test this on your palette also, or just keep a plate or a sheet of paper around and put the colors next to each other and see if they work. So if I do this, because I'm going to be using those two colors and mixing them together, that works actually really well with the pink. That looks nice on the eye. There we go. Yeah, using, Ren's got it, Rhonda's got it, the bird with a brush post there is, it's always comparative, right? Colors change depending on what's next to them. So you can use a comparison like that, like bright cherry red is a saturated red and dull brick red is a less saturated red. You can still get a pretty intense brick red, but it's going to be less saturated just because it's not as vibrant. It has brown or black or something of the sort in it. Now, to really get an idea here, let's do some... I said I would talk about bone and chitin today, so I am going to talk about bone and chitin. We actually are talking about bone and chitin. We're just talking about the color theory of bone and chitin instead of doing a lot of other stuff. The other way I could do to make these play well together, by the way, the other trick would be to take a little bit of my ivory and mix it into the pink, making a warmer color up there, and use that for highlight. So essentially I'm like, well, look, ivory, you really like this pink because there's a little bit of you in it. And that absolutely works. Like you can do that pretty much to highlight any color with any other color. If you mix transitions of them from one to the other, you can even highlight orange with blue and vice versa. It's just a matter of convincing them that they work together. And the easy way to do that is to either glaze or to mix a little bit of the one into the other. I could even demo that. Right. Yeah, exactly. What Rhonda said about fast saturation. So if everything else is bone colored and then you pop even a brick red onto the model, it's going to look like the most saturated thing. No, color value is more of a light and dark thing. Saturation is more of a vibrancy thing, Bishop. So it's like how people use bright. The problem is that bright is a very contradictory term in our language, where a lot of people think bright means saturated and vibrant. And sometimes it does in American English, but it also means light. And light and saturated are not the same thing.
Hey, Miss Ann, real quick.
Yeah.
Do you want your car door shut?
Oh, yeah.
Did you left it open, apparently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'll have them shut it.
Yes. Yes, it was I was on the phone and grabbing things. I wonder if it just kind of bounced. I didn't notice. Anyway. So, all right, let's talk about like bone and chitin. Obviously, one way to do this is just to highlight along, your upper surfaces and your edges and make the edges stand out like that. And it works. It works just fine. So, but the other thing you can do with chitin, which I actually really like, is, and you can kind of see where Julia suggested it, right? There's little like polyps and bone spurs that are coming up. So you can hit those. I'm going to use creamy ivory just to pick those out. You could also put a wash over this surface to bring out all these details if you wanted to. So you can do that, but the other thing you can do is thin down just a little bit your creamy ivory and stipple a texture on. And I think this works really well for chitin because it tends to be lumpy and bumpy. If you look at crabs, for example. Yes, what Rhonda says. Just like I said before, you can mute a color by adding white to it. She just mentioned that. You can also mute it by adding black, and obviously, as we gave it as an example, gray. So play around. But really, what it comes down to is if you're working with one very bright color, when you go to choose your next color, make sure it's also a really bright color. Not light, but bright, as in, really vibrant. So like, for example, these guys all work together. See how bright they are? Like this one is darker, this one is lighter, that one is lighter, but they all are very vibrant, right? They're all like, wow, colors. Whereas these neutrals, they don't jump out at you like that. So these are muted. Yay. And that's the triad, by the way, for the Kickstarter. My favorite triad. I love these colors. I have been looking for an example. So let's do some stippling. I don't want to use a great brush when I stipple. I want to use kind of a brush I've abused. So let me look for my abused brushes. Let's see here. I thought I had one. It must have fled. It knew I was, there it is. So one of my brushes ceased to hold a good tip, and so I now use it for it's an Escoda, I think. It was a trial that I bought to try out their brushes. But it doesn't like to hold a tip, so now it is my horrible abuse you brush. Usually I use it just for mixing. But today we're going to use it for stippling. So you get paint on your brush. You're going to dab a lot of it off. Kind of like dry brushing, but you don't want to take that much off. And you don't mind if your tip gets distorted. In fact, you want your tip to like kind of be a little bit distorted and broken up. You want an interesting pattern like that. And then you can use this, and if you've got a very small figure, you'll need to use a smaller brush, to kind of dab all around here. And what it gives you is a semi-random pattern that suggests raised areas. Let's see if I can get it. There you go. Now you can see a little bit of it. I wanted to get our focus so that we could get a little closer. You guys see the artifacts that I'm leaving? So essentially, and once you've got a little bit of that set up, the great thing about it is that you can accentuate it. So I'm gonna just dab a little bit down here because it's not as close to the light. And it gives you kind of a cool, kind of pebbly pattern texture. See that? Yeah, Maldrac, I think it's Greek, and so the CH tends to be a K. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know we have at least one Greek person in the chat, although you may not be like into word meanings and histories. But especially in Greek, if you've got a Greek root to a word, the CH can be a K a lot. So let's see here. Now I want a brush that will hold a point. Let's grab... This Reaper Zero is actually doing very well for me lately, so I'm going to use him. So now, if I want to get more of that pattern, I load up my brush just like I would for layering, and I can kind of dab a little extra at the places where I want even more. And I don't want to lose my random pattern, but what I'm doing is essentially choosing to accentuate parts of it to make it heavier in places so that it looks more irregular. So you're trying to make little dots, essentially. It doesn't matter. The nice thing about stippling and using it for textures is you don't have to be precise. You just want to kind of spread out your pattern a little bit. You don't want it to be too regular. So if you have a blob somewhere, you don't need to do a blob right next to it. You could do a tiny blob right next to it, but you want to kind of make it a little irregular, just like a crab's shell. So you're looking like that. And you get a kind of a nice kind of pebbly texture that actually brings out a lot of the texture that's inherent in this sculpt. You can also accentuate wherever there's a raised area. But it looks very different from just doing a normal highlight, see? So now if you decide after all this that maybe your texture got a little bit strong, here let me go overboard a little bit and then we'll do a glaze. Knock it down again. Anne likes going overboard. If there are any questions, let me look at your chat. This is a Bones Teak Champion, Glenn, right down here. I got my little sign down here on the bottom of the screen. We don't do freeze for this show yet, sadly. We're thinking about, you know, maybe doing interesting or special giveaways eventually, but first we want to kind of get settled in at our time slot. Hello, Planar Crossroads. Good to see you. All right, so we've got a lot of texture, but maybe it's gotten a little strong. It looks too dotty. Maybe I don't like it. I like it, actually, but maybe I don't like it. So if we want to knock it down, we can take the initial color, if I want to, or I could take the lighter color. You could glaze with either. So it depends. If I think maybe my chitin is too yellow and I want to bring it up a step, let's do that. Let's take Creamy Ivory and glaze with a light color. It's much more titchy. Because when you glaze with a light color, you're dealing with a color with a lot of white in it. And that means that that color wants to cover. And so when you're trying to get it to go kind of transparent and play nice and lay down an even layer of pigment, it can kind of be not for the faint of heart. Malin, I'm thinking about that, but a lot of these models I want to demo more than one thing on. So I'm not sure how that would work. That would essentially make a lot of extra time for me prepping these minis, the same mini, like every other week. And I didn't want to do that, so.
Thinking about for the bits.
So I'm thinking about it. But it also, well, I guess it also means physically mailing stuff, across the world. But we do that as it is. Justin does that as it is.
Yes.
So when you're glazing, you want something that's going to be really thin, like colored water. Like really, you can only barely see how you can see that just a little bit. That's what you want. You want a ghost. You want something that looks very ghostly when you glaze. And then you're going to load up your brush. That's a pretty full brush. It's not holding a tip real well because it's got a lot of stuff on it. And you can do this two ways. If you're fast, you can actually unload your brush and just brush it over the surface really quick. And if you're not too fast, you can put a lot on because then it takes a while to dry. So let's do that. Let's just pour a lot on. We're brushing a thin layer over the whole surface. And then I'm going to quick dry off my brush a little bit. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to use the tip to wick some of this color out of the cracks. So like around all these little bumps.
No problem, Glenn.
I want excess color to come away. And I kind of stick to the edges normally, although you can kind of lightly dab on the surface. The key here is if you stick to the edges when you're wicking away your excess fluid, you're not going to like accidentally strip up paint here. If your paint's taking a while to dry, then you can do the whole, dab lightly at the surface with your brush to take up excess color. But what that does, look, we have evened out the texture. It is not so spotty anymore. You'll notice it also has taken this up a level, so it's not as dark as this color anymore. So glazing with lighter colors can work really well for you. It can also work really well on skin tones to even out transitions. So cross-platform giveaway, showing pics of reproducing. I don't think we've gotten that far, Forsaken Crow. Pretty much we're like, maybe this kind of format of show will work. Let's see.
I actually was talking to John about possibly doing some social media type giveaways. And integrating there. The inherent problem for giveaways for us, though, is just logistically how long they take.
Yeah.
So, for instance, what a lot of people don't know, and this is just information, is that basically I'm the IT person on site for the entire company. I'm as well as the videographer / technical director of this department.
Yes.
So if I spend X hours a week streaming plus doing giveaways, I don't have time to improve the stream. Right?
Yeah.
Doing things like that.
That's the thing, is right now Justin is the man. And so if we do a crap ton of giveaways, then he gets stuck for 2 or 3 hours packing stuff up carefully, mailing it out to all of you, double checking information, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, right. But we don't have enough subs yet to afford Justin having an assistant, other than Collins, who has his own stuff to do.
Correct. And so it's basically Collins and I, and Collins is now focusing more on his primary job. So
right, yeah.
It's actually the department came together kind of as a do this in your spare time, and now it's become so much more substantial.
Yes. Lebralski, on that glaze, that's way too much water. Normally, I'm going to say 3-to-1 is as watery as I would get. Oh yeah, Seal Dancing Reel, totally. There is. Okay, so glazes are your thinnest application. Washes are thicker than glazes. And then you get to layering consistency, which is thicker than that. So essentially, only with really light colors, like pure white or something close to it, would I go to 3-to-1 water to paint. And even then, 3-to-1 might be too much. 2-to-1 might be perfect. I'd have to see. And it depends on how strong your white is, too. Yeah, Everlina. It's more relaxing to us, too, not to have to worry about it. I mean, on the one hand, giveaways are nice, right? Because it gives us subs, and that's what funds this department and enables us to keep throwing so much time at it, and people. Because the more we make, the more they can actually pay us to do more.
Absolutely.
This is all an experiment.
It feels, honestly, like since I started up here, it feels like we've started a small business.
Yeah, it
feels
is.
like that's what
it's like building my Patreon, right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and actually I should bring that up because, guys, I just did a thing on the bone colors for my Patreon. I think it was December, last month's color workshop, which is the $5 tier. And the $5 tier is awesome on my Patreon because right now we're running a special offer that if you sign up at $5, you also get all of the $10 videos from last year.
We could do that because we did that for Josh on Monday going forward, and this is entirely on you or whether or not you want to do it. Would possibly give away $5 levels to your Patreon.
Oh my gosh, that would be crazy talk. I don't know though; they don't have a way to gift levels yet on Patreon.
No, but what we do is we would draw winners. They would give me their information, and then I believe I give them a link, and then we sign them up.
Okay.
There are ways to...
There are ways? There are ways of making you work for us. I mean, or something.
Yes.
But yeah, we can think about that. Anyway, it's patreon.com/paintingbig, guys, right now. And that special offer is only running for another week to get all of last year's $10 videos in addition to a $5 sub. So yeah, sign up for $5 and get a whole crap ton. Like we did, I did 35 PDFs and 29 videos last year for my Patreon. Just a crap ton of stuff. And it's everything from like basics tips to, to really advanced stuff like working on my crystal brush entry and doing that crazy freehand I did. So there's all sorts. Yes, Jacob, I saw you. I was so happy to see you sign up for my Patreon. I hope you love it. Guys, I can't even tell you how much I appreciate my Patreon. Like, it just does make my whole life like more awesome. I love doing content for it. I love my guys. Our Discord is super fun and like chatty and friendly. I love it. I love all of it. All right, so let's talk about washes and glazing and all that. Oh my. So a wash is thicker. So like 1 drop of paint, although this is a really transparent color, but the basic menu for a wash, I use brush-on sealer to thin down washes. I like to use our gloss and brush-on sealers because they essentially they add body. What you're doing when you are adding a lot of water to our paint, to any paint, is you are coming closer to breaking the bonds between the resins. And by the resins, I mean the acrylic or the synthetic latex or whatever they're using, right? So if you instead use a medium of some sort, like our brush-on sealer, like matte medium, like gloss sealer, any of those things, you're thinning the paint with something transparent, but you're also adding body. So at that point, you don't have to worry so much about breaking the bonds between the paint because you just threw extra bonds into it. If you just use water, you can break the paint really fast, and that's what glazing does, actually. Usually I do not use a medium for glazing. Because I'm intending to put it on extremely thin, and I'm intending to wick off all the excess. If you wick off all the excess and you don't let it pool, it will not dry funky. But if you take a glaze consistency and you try to like apply it like a wash and let it pool, it'll do that ringing thing where it dries on raised surfaces, it makes those little watermark lines. That's because you've broken the paint. And because the paint isn't holding together anymore, the pigment isn't holding together, and that's what you're seeing with those watermark lines. Well, I don't use glazed medium, Glenn, because I just don't find it necessary. I just glaze by adding water. But a lot of people like it. Glazed medium is meant as, just like I said, is that in-between step to protect you from not making the mistake. If you use a glazed medium, you don't have to worry so much about having to wick all your excess stuff off, and if you accidentally forget a spot, it's probably not going to dry in a ring because your glazed medium is going to save you from that. It may kind of puddle a little bit there. You may get it a little stronger than you wanted if you forget to wick off a part. So glazed medium is training wheels for glazing. It just helps you not make the mistake. So all right, let's see here. So a wash, this right here, it's my new formula. I used to do 1 drop of paint, 3 drops of sealer, and 3 drops of water, but lately I like a little bit more sealer in my mix. So this is 1 drop of paint, roughly 4 drops of sealer, and 2 drops of water. So I shoved it a little bit more toward the sealer. And what you can do with a wash, obviously, is you can put it on everything. The wash is meant to go all over everything, but the wash is meant to pool, unlike a glaze. You want the wash to pool because you want it to go into all these cracks and crevices. You want it to outline your details. It's a quick and dirty way to shade. That's what a wash is for. A glaze is not for that. Glazes are not quick and dirty ways to shade. That is not their purpose in life. Also, washes almost always dry lighter than they look wet. Be aware.
Lord 17C, to my knowledge, our
Ed
paints
mentioned it yesterday.
Well, don't our paints actually already work really well with airbrushes?
Well, yeah, they really do. I mean, you really should just like use our regular paints for airbrushing if you want to save money. Because airbrush paints are just thinned paints, guys. Like seriously, like thin your own.
But Collins uses it all of the time. Our paints through his airbrush, and he loves it. And so does Daryl. So does Kevin.
Yep. So does Michael Proctor. So does Caleb and Kat. So do a whole bunch of people who taught at ReaperCon who are professional miniature painters or just really talented, otherwise painters. They all do it. So anyway, washes, right? So you can see how heavy, it brought out the details, it outlined things, and I'm letting it pool because there's, it's thick enough still that I didn't break the paint. Glazing is like I did over here. What you do with glazes is you're not trying to bring out detail, you're actually trying to do the opposite. You're either trying to shift a color, or you're trying to kind of integrate a color so that the texture or detail recedes. So like glazes are used to hide obvious layers when you're trying to blend, but you don't blend really well. You can put a glaze on there to disguise that. If I decided that this raspberry color wasn't blue enough and I wanted it more purple, I could glaze with a blue and actually make it look more purple. So it's for shifting color, for hiding texture or inadvertent brush strokes that you don't want to show. And here I used it for both purposes. I used it to hide the texture a little bit, and I used it to lighten the area so that it would go better with my raspberry. So that would be, and glazing, whereas this is more a 1 drop of paint, 3 or 4 drops of sealer, and like 2 or 3 drops of water. This is more like a direct 2 drops of paint to 1 drop of, or 1 drop of paint to 2 drops of water. At most, pure white is the one that you're going to have to maybe go up to a 3-to-1 for a glaze. Be careful, but you might have to do that. That's because our pure white, which is 9039, is our most strongly pigmented white. And the more white pigment you have in something, the more you're going to have to thin it to get it to go translucent, because white does not want to do that.
Lord said that they have an issue with the color coming out wrong after they thin for the airbrush.
Okay.
So is that what would be your best solution for that?
Okay, so some colors do dry darker than they look wet. You do see a little bit of color shift with some of our colors. That happens with a lot of acrylic paints. But if you're seeing a really bad color shift, then I'd want to know what you're using for thinner. I have seen our paint shift color if certain types of thinners are used. But the other thing is also that you may notice a shifting color just because the finish is different. When you're doing a spray on, yeah, did that help Steel Dancing Reel? So you know like the difference between a wash and glaze now? So what can happen when you're airbrushing is obviously you're throwing a fine mist of paint onto the model. And if you get any like kind of transitory drying or pebbling, or the finish is just a little bit more matte, then that can actually change the color. A little bit of alcohol. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to ask Michael Proctor about that. How I would guess, how extreme is the color shift would be one of my questions. Mostly what I've seen with Michael, he says he uses water, I think at 10%. 90% water and 10% isopropyl. And I don't even like that. Like I tend to just use water, and a lot of our people just use water for thinning our paints. So I wonder if that would help. But yeah, I'm not sure. There's so many things that can cause a shift in color, and it depends on how much of a shift, really. It's a bit lighter than what it should be. All right. Yeah, it could be alcohol. It could be, or it could be the finish, because when you get a little bit more matte, it does cause the colors to look lighter. Yeah, try straight water. If it's not that, then I'm betting that maybe you're just getting a little bit of a finish that's a little bit more matte, and maybe it's doing that. Cheap Joe's Art Supply, if you Google it, and you Google porcelain palette or porcelain mixing tray, he has a whole bunch of them. This one is a big one. It's actually got 28 wells. It extends quite a ways, because I like to make lots of mixes when I'm working on stuff. So it is cute. I love that it has really small wells. As you can see, it keeps my paint good for a very long time. The more water you add to your paint, the longer it will keep your paint good, and the bigger your paint puddles are. So sometimes if I'm working with a full strength paint, I'll actually do this. I'll just put water kind of around it in the well. Helps keep it from drying. But yeah. All right, yeah, Lord Zypher is good. Yeah, aren't these great? Like, I really like them because we're usually not using a lot of paint, and usually with my paint wells, I'll do like 8 drops of paint, and then I'll add some water, obviously to bring it to whatever consistency I need. So usually it ends up about 12 drops of mix, and it's pretty full. These wells are pretty full, as you can see, and the more full they are, the less surface area exposed to the air, and then they essentially stay at the paint consistency I need for ages. I paint at Paint Club on the weekends. It's 4 hours. And usually I might have to add a little bit of water to one of my colors, maybe 3 hours in, if I'm doing like layering and it's slightly evaporated. But otherwise it stays good for a long time. And I like that I can control the consistency a lot better than a wet palette. All right. I think that's all the questions. Wow. Woof. Okay, what time is it here? All right, we're about 45 minutes in.
Yes.
Well, let's look at our wash and how it's dried. Actually, it dried really well. So one of the things that you should know about Bone Shadow 9058 is 1, that it's almost entirely raw umber, and 2, that raw umber has crappy coverage. But what this means is that it actually makes a great wash or a great glaze, because it is such a transparent color. You can see how transparent it goes. But it is also a nice toasty warm color. If you add white to it, it immediately goes gray, because this is very similar. This is just this with white added. So you can see how gray it goes when you add white. But if you just thin this down and add it as a glaze, you warm up your color a lot. You can even see that this color is a little bit warmer than it was with that just initial gray. So, and once once I do a wash, I could just go, and I could do my stipple trick, actually, that I did on the other side. I have my correct brush for it. Yay.
Yes, actually, to my knowledge, Kiri is doing well.
Yeah, Kira's doing well. She had a little bit of issues of a different sort this morning, but that's just because she's an old dog. She turned 12 yesterday? The day before yesterday. So she's getting up there in her years. I'm going to stipple a little bit of texture onto this. And then I'm going to layer a little bit on the edges here.
Also, while we have, basically our primary audience in here right now, I wanted to let them know that there was a decent chance that, or a high chance that we do not have a show this afternoon.
Yeah, I have to go to the doctor, guys. I have a
and
funky thing with my hearing, and I want to make sure it's not an infection. So
yeah, Anne's also not feeling super great. So
yeah,
but we figured it wasn't that big of an issue to cancel the show since you guys
and I may be
see
back
us regularly. So.
Yeah. I'll try to get done with my appointment. And hopefully I'll be feeling a little bit better. We'll see. But we'll kind of play it by ear. I mean, I don't want to cancel the show, obviously, because I really enjoy doing this for you guys. I was going to try to get some more work done on the base for the Dragons Don't Share. Because painting rocks is exciting. And I'm still trying to think about colors for that white dragon. I'm kind of thinking maybe we should try a very pale version of what we did on the black dragon. Like work with greens and purples and just make it all very pale for the shading. That might work. So yeah, right here I'm just using a little bit of layering to accentuate the edges of the chitin. And when you do a layering stroke, always start pointing toward your shadow, pull back toward your highlight, and then raise your brush up. The reason you do that is when you lift your brush up, you're leaving a tiny puddle of paint there that's a little bit stronger, and that's what that's what creates a blend when you're layering. You can also use like a crosshatch stroke, and you can do the stippling stroke with layering with much thinner paint. And it leaves an interesting texture when you do any of those things. Your brush stroke is actually pretty important as far as like what your model ends up looking like. You can get some very interesting effects. Sue Wachowski, who used to teach at ReaperCon, used to do a lot of cross-hatching, and as a result, her work looked really soft focus and was really actually a beautiful effect and really one of the features of her style. So think about how you are applying the paint. Because it can essentially contribute to you having a very distinctive look to your miniatures. It also helps train you for doing textures if you ever get to that point where you want to suggest cloth texture or leather or anything like that. Knowing different brush strokes and being comfortable with them and paint consistencies can help you with textures. Yeah. All right.
Ron is ambling about our hallways now.
He's ambling. Yes, thank you for the well wishes, guys. Yeah, I'm not like prone to ear infections, but it's just feeling a little bit wonky today. So I wanted to call before the stream so that I could warn you guys if I might be out for the afternoon. Because you never know. You go to the doctor's office, and sometimes they get you in right away or even early, and sometimes it takes an hour and a half because they're running behind. So cannot really tell the future at this point, but I will attempt to get there early and cross fingers.
The 3 p.m. time change is permanent.
Yeah, the 3 p.m. is. We're trying to bring our shows in line so we're always predictably at the same time. It makes it easier for you guys to schedule watching it. And also, Justin and I actually need to do things like eat. Because before, when we would stop the show at like noon or even after, and then we had to be prepping up here again at 1, and I have to like take Kiri out, and he has to like wrap up stuff and get things on YouTube, and yeah, we just did not have time to eat lunch. And then I wasn't eating lunch till 4, and that was just not kosher. And Justin sometimes wasn't eating lunch at all. So,
yeah, I would basically just skip it and go to dinner.
Yeah, and that's not healthy either, So the higher you highlight your little layers, the more your layers will stand out. So if I go from here up to like a pure white.
I will see if I can do that sticks. And to your point earlier that you pointed out with the UNT internship, that's actually what we were kind of all talking and looking at, because that would be the easiest way to get some help in here.
Hey, it works for Blizzard and other game companies.
A lot of places intern. I mean, it's good experience, I think. You could just do what I did and kind of, you know, create it all from scratch.
Just doing some highlights here, using some pure white to bring out these little nubbies on his skin. See, so that extra white layer really brings up the color on this area. I don't want to go too overboard unless I'm looking to make this this chitin an off-white. The other thing you can do is if you want to actually suggest long strokes and kind of leave artifacts so you can see the streaks, you can kind of imply that the chitin here is rough and cracking, which is a nice trick also. And you can actually accentuate that if you want by taking a darker brown and introducing that. Let's grab this. So
yeah.
Let's say...
Yeah, UNT's RTVF program is actually, it's pretty solid. I entered into it briefly before I started a business the first time.
So let's say I do that. If I make those little lines, they're not perfect. They're just kind of placeholders. Then I can kind of go in with my aged bone and narrow them down a little to make them really thin. Sometimes that's the easiest way to do a thin line, by the way, guys, is to just kind of draw kind of a clunky line and then go back in with your base color and thin it down by painting on either side of it. So then you can kind of suggest that there's cracking toward the edge here. And I probably want to do a slightly stronger dot, like right there at the edge, to suggest a little divot. But you can just create an optical illusion with paint pretty much that there's cracking here. Then he's got a very worn carapace.
Also, as a part of the homework stuff for these remote streams we may be doing, Anne,
yeah,
I took some stuff home last night to basically do homework with.
Oh, good.
To try to remotely set it up. And I may be doing some streaming tonight.
Ooh.
That is as a part of homework,
awesome.
As well as my
course.
own personal streaming.
So
I may be streaming some Escape from Tarkov for anyone who may or may not want to watch.
Just as a trial. We're trying to see if we can do this
yes.
remotely. So maybe we could have like people like Michael Proctor stream, for example, from Colorado and stuff like that. Yeah, that would be cool, Justin.
Because if it works out, then I will take that setup and we'll transfer it to you. And
and then I can try it from home, and then we can. I mean, essentially, that's what we want to get to, so that we can not be limited by geography anymore in who we get to stream for us. So one last little tip here, guys. So if you do this, if you do the little lines to try to suggest there's cracks along the edge of the chitin, the last thing you want to do is take your pure white and highlight right along the bottom edge of these, if you can. You want to use thinner paint usually so that you can do it. But what that essentially does is create an optical illusion that's raised and that's lowered. So it's catching, essentially light is catching the edge of each of those chitin pieces. So it helps to create that optical illusion that these cracks are actually physically on the model instead of just paint.
Forsaken Crow wants to know how you do a color shift on the chitin.
Color shift on chitin, layering from one color to another. So I would essentially do a blue to green layer. I would probably start with a blue and layer it up with green. It takes a long time if you're doing non-color shift, as we used to call it, non-iridescent. Because you are essentially going from one color to another, and then you're doing... I actually did my Eldar like this because I'm a glutton for punishment. I went from, oh boy, like runic purple as my shadow on like a Ridderlich blue or void blue, I think, and then I went up to green and then yellow. So I think color shift, non-iridescent, like creating a color shift pattern just with paint and not by using metallics or color shift paints is going to have to be another show. It's a lot about light theory. It's a lot about getting a photo reference. It's a lot about creating smooth blending. If you don't have smooth blends, it's not going to carry. So it's not for the faint of heart. I have seen Jennifer Haley do it. I have done it to, kind of a quickie effect. It is not undoable. It is a bit of work. There's my little guy. So there, we've got some nice bone. Let's do kind of a 50-50 mix. I think we're going to wrap up pretty soon, guys. Hopefully I answered color theory questions today, and paint consistency questions, and texture questions. Tomorrow, Pro Tips, Vigos, is going to be, I'm going to try to do some beat up leather. I'm actually going to be doing a lot of these kind of techniques, but showing you how they apply on leather. I've got Mr. Fire Giant coming up with me again, and we're going to do him, is the plan, because he's got a nice wide shoulder armor piece that would work really well for suggesting texture and essentially doing scratches and how the edges wear on leather. It's a little bit more of an advanced Pro Tips. But I like to kind of break it up. I kind of want to give you guys kind of a selection of stuff. I do the same on my Patreon, where I just want to do across the board, because I know on my Patreon I have a lot of people who are more basics and are just starting the hobby, or they're just starting to try to get better. And then I also have people who are more advanced. So I try to give a bunch. And on our streams, of course, we're going to have the same thing. Some of you are going to be, really awesome and not have a lot to learn from me probably. And then there's others who are like in the middle of their journey and more at an intermediate level, and some of you who are just starting out. So that's all cool. And I want to make sure to offer value no matter where you are in your painting journey. So I'm going to just do a little bit of stippling up here. I like adding texture. I really feel like stippling and adding like little textures like these splits and everything is fun. I think it adds visual interest. It's not just plain and boring. It shows a little bit of mastery when you can do a kind of irregular pattern and carry it off. And it shows that you're paying attention to detail too.
I imagine there will be pro tips in the future that will cover eyes, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have eyes. I should just get an eyeball monster, and we can all paint the faceless horror, because that's my favorite model for eyeballs, hands down. If you want practice painting eyeballs, get a faceless horror. It's the gibbering mouther of our miniatures pantheon, and it is just eyes and mouths. And the nice thing about it is the eyes are all different sizes, so you can practice on bigger eyes until you get better, and then you can start smaller and smaller eyes. So maybe we'll do that. I'll look at my schedule. I actually wrote up a schedule for like the first month, and I'll see what I've got on there. But we can always kind of switch that schedule up if a lot of people would like me to do eyeballs. I also do have a free video on my Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/paintingbig, I do have a painting little eyes. I did one on one of the Dungeons and Doggies models, actually, just for fun. And it's a short little, I think it's a relatively short video, and it's free on my Patreon. It's a public post. You can also take a look on there. There's a public post of an index of content that shows you all the stuff that I covered this past year on my Patreon if you're still thinking about joining. And do join our Discord, because we have fun. All right, there we go. There is our fishy. So you see how a little bit of highlighting and some stippled detail and adding some cracks really makes an effective color. Doo-doo-doo. Hey there. Yeah, really late, Mike. We're about wrapping it up. I was doing bone and chitin. I was doing chitin on, I was doing two different sides. I was doing a more subtle stippled effect over here with the warmer ivory triad, with creamy ivory and stained ivory. And then I was doing the aged bone and bone shadow triad over here and making it work. My Discord is only for the Patreon right now, Planar Crossroads, because I was looking for extra value that I could give to my patrons. So one of the things of signing up for my Patreon is just you get extra time with me, because I'm on there and I will answer questions and I will give you, short critiques. And if you are like, why isn't this eyeball working? I will tell you. Things like that. Yeah. I mean, Reaper's working on their Discord finally. So I'll be in there a little bit, but the Patreon is actually paying some of my bills, so I had to pretty much do it that way. When I got my divorce, it got a lot harder to support, myself. So the Patreon has really helped me that way, because I had to rent a house to keep my dogs, essentially, and that was not cheap in Denton. Actually, it's kind of crazy how expensive it is to live in Denton these days. So yes, many apologies that my Discord is not public and is Patreon only.
It's just one of those awesome perks.
Yeah. I had to, it is exactly that. It's like I was looking for perks to offer people.
Don't feel like that's an apology type thing.
Well, I like to be inclusive. So for me, it's like, I feel sad sometimes. Coffee and Nerdery Beer, I didn't teach the last couple of years, because I also do the judging for the painting contest, and I do the awards ceremony and all that stuff. I may teach a couple classes this year. I haven't decided yet, but I am thinking about it. And if I do, it'll probably be my color theory / paint mixing one and my layering and glazing one, because I really feel like layering and glazing are like core techniques that are nice for you to practice hands-on with somebody to give you feedback like me.
Level 3 may offer classes.
Sci-fi glow effect. Well, glow effects are not just for sci-fi. Glow effects for everything. I could totally do glow effects. Actually, I think I have glowing effects on the docket for the fire giant. I think I wanted to do like glowing eyes and stuff. Chris Air, the Reaper Discord is not yet up, but I was just talking to Ed and Dave last night, and it is on the list of we are absolutely doing it.
Yeah,
So
it's being worked on. It was actually worked on yesterday a little bit, but we didn't want to release it until it was like actually like looked more than like just a server that we created.
yeah, we're trying to actually get it all set up with permissions and you know.
Yeah, and like priority bandwidth and that kind of stuff too. So.
Yeah. Grendo Cookies, I did not do the paint job for the Teak Champion on the website. I wish I had. I don't remember who did it, but I really do love this model. I think he's fantastic. I think Julie really nailed the fish people. I really love them. So yes, if you don't own this guy, pick him up. He's way cool. Here's his little item number. Any last questions, guys? We are going to wrap it, I think, so that I can get to my doctor appointment and Justin can get some lunch eventually. And yeah, it's just a fun model. And I mean, it's a fish. You can paint it any color you want. So that's one of the great things about it. It's just, I look at it as like a pure fantasy model. It has all sorts of interesting areas between the chitin plates and the regular like leathery flesh. And then you've got the fins that you can do all sorts of stuff on. So I really like these guys.
I like the pink, it's a good color.
The pink, yeah, and you can see. It's our orchid purple plus white. So, you know, if you're looking to paint something pink, it is good. All right, Justin. Yeah, many colors equal rainbow trout demon. That sounds fantastic. I bet adventurers would like be shocked and appalled at the thought of a rainbow trout demon, don't you think?
Yes.
It would definitely be one of those things where your party was like, we are totally grilling this after we kill it, though. Well,
Okay.
tasty. Rainbow trout is tasty. All right, yeah, I totally spewed a lot of stuff today, Julie Cat, that's for sure. I went heavy into the edumacation, which, yeah, I never know when I'm going to be in the mood to just sit here and ramble at you guys, but
All right.
yeah, I think we're good.
Awesome. Well.
Tasty with butter, yes. Yeah, I'm going to be doing more stuff for my YouTube, hopefully, Mike. That's in my plan. I'm just trying to free up time for it right now. I would like to do more short, free content for my YouTube, and that also is painting big. But I'm trying to balance it, right? Because you don't want to like short your patrons. You want to make sure that they get a lot of value for their membership, but then you also want to get yourself out there a little bit more into the wider community so people can discover you. So, you know, it's a balancing act. It's as Justin says, it's like starting a business is crazy. And Patreon is essentially starting a business. So
Yes.
in addition to my full-time job and my relationship and my dogs and my everything else that I do, I also
Getting in the way.
darned, yeah, I know it's all David's fault, right?
Yeah, let's just blame David. So that's easier.
Blaming David, aw.
I like David.
He's
It's
my
fine.
sweetie.
Yeah, I believe that. But so is Kiri. Kiri's a sweetie
Kiri
too.
is also, yes, those are my two loves. Well, my Patreon is my third love, so I've got three loves.
Maybe one of these days we can get her on camera. If she
Kiri?
feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can get her upstairs.
Okay.
I mean, she'd probably just pop her head up and then look for somewhere to lie down, but
But we'd have a
give her
puppy
sock.
cam.
Puppy cam?
And people like puppy cams.
People do like puppy cams. And she is adorable.
Yeah.
She is a totally adorable
Completely
dog.
agree.
I keep meaning to send you a picture so you can put her up on the
Oh,
screen.
yeah.
Because I've got my favorite Kiri picture on my phone. But yeah.
All right, guys.
So good.
Well, thank you very much. And
Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate it. How many people did we get today?
150, I think.
Wow,
Did we pick
good.
that?
Good turnout. Thanks, guys. Yay!
Yes.
You make us happy when you show up.
Yeah, thank you
Yes,
for showing
puppy
up.
cam. Don't worry. I'll get at least a picture of Kiri to Justin. I'll do it right after the stream.
On that note,
Okey-dokey. Yeah.
I think that's
I think
pretty
we're there.
much it.
Yeah, have a great day, everybody. Hopefully, like I said, it might not go on time or it might not go this afternoon, but I'm going to try. We'll see when I get back from the doctor and how I feel.
Yeah.
So this afternoon's show may or may not. I would like to.
So-
we'll see.
Check back in for on Twitch for the actual update on that.
Yeah.
So-
Watch our Twitch to
Yeah.
see if Anna's sick or if Anna's not sick, or if Anna's going to be late or what we're going to do. I'm going to try to make it all work.
If not, then we'll see if we can't get maybe a substitute in here. Maybe have Sadie come in a day early.
Yeah.
Something. We'll,
Yeah,
we'll,
or
we'll see
Sadie
what we
could
get.
do a half an hour, and then I could come in for 45 minutes at the end
Sure.
of that. I mean, we could totally hand off and still have a painting feature.
Yeah, we'll see what we're doing.
Yeah, Mike, I just have an ear infection or some such, and my hearing's all screwed up. So, you never want to wait on those. You always want to get to the doctor. So I never, after the health issues I've had, I do not slack when I don't feel good, guys. I go right to the doctor right away. Trust me. You may be afraid of what you'll find out, but you'll be a lot more afraid if it turns bad and you haven't gone to the doctor. So that's my pro tip, my health pro tip. That and take care of yourselves, exercise, do that kind of thing.
All right. Well, I have a raid set up here.
Oh, who are we raiding?
One of the people we host pretty regularly.
Oh, really? Who is that?
That Mr. Shy.
Oh, okay. All right. So we're not going to Jimmy today. We're doing a different person.
Jimmy is not online from what I can tell.
Jimmy's always online.
Yeah, well, sometimes. Yeah,
Oh, that's right.
now they have a
Babies
baby, so.
happen. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I hope you guys all have a great day. Please raid our recipient here.
Yes.
Here we go.
All right. Well, thank you
Bye,
guys,
everybody.
and
This is Ian signing off.
we will see you later.
Yes, hopefully we will see you later.
Hopefully.
Bye.
Adios.